Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you forgot yourself in the process? That's how my marriage began. Full of love, full of dreams, full of promises that seemed unbreakable. My name is Sophia, and for as long as I can remember, I believed in happy endings. I believed in building a life with someone who would never let me down. When I married Daniel, I thought I had found that man. He was charming, ambitious, and always knew how to make me laugh. I remember our wedding day, how his hands trembled as he slipped the ring onto my finger. He whispered, "Forever, Sophia. I'll never forget this day. I'll never forget you." But promises, sometimes they fade. And sometimes, the people you trust the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. This story isn't just about heartbreak. It's about betrayal, about strength, and about finding a way to rise when the person you trusted most forgets who you are to them. The day it all began was our 10th wedding anniversary. 10 years, an entire decade of building a life together. I had been planning this day for months. I wanted it to be perfect, something Daniel and I would cherish forever. I booked a table at the very restaurant where we had our first date. I bought him a limited edition watch he'd been admiring for years. I even had the chef prepare a dessert with the words, 10 years of forever. But the day came, and Daniel forgot. Not just forgot, he didn't even notice. He rushed out of the house that morning in his suit, grabbing his briefcase and muttering something about a meeting at work. No kiss, no good morning, no hint of recognition that this day meant anything at all. I stood there in my silk dress, holding the little velvet box with his gift inside, staring at the door as it slammed shut behind him. I told myself, maybe he's planning a surprise. Maybe he's pretending to forget so he can shock me later. But the hours ticked by. The reservations went cold. The candles I lit melted into nothing. Midnight came and went, and Daniel never came home. That was the night something inside me broke. The next morning, he stumbled in around 6 a.m., exhausted, tie loosened, hair messy. He smelled faintly of alcohol, and when he saw me sitting on the couch, eyes swollen from crying, he looked confused, like I was the one who had done something wrong. "Why are you up?" he asked casually, setting his briefcase down. I stared at him in disbelief. "Do you really not know what yesterday was?" He frowned, rubbed his forehead, and shook his head. "Was it your mom's birthday?" That was it. That was the moment I felt a coldness spread through me, a realization that the man I had given 10 years of my life to didn't even remember the day he had once called unforgettable. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I just whispered. "It was our anniversary, Daniel. 10 years. For a split second, I saw guilt flash in his eyes, but he quickly masked it with irritation. "I've been under a lot of stress at work, Sophia. I don't have time to remember every little thing." Every little thing? Our marriage, our life together, was now just a little thing to him. But here's the twist he didn't know. For the past 2 years, while he was busy climbing the corporate ladder at Hamilton & Comerton, the investment firm he worked for, I had been working quietly in the background. My late father had left me a substantial inheritance, one I had always kept private. With careful investments and the right partnerships, that inheritance grew. And 3 months before our anniversary, I did something bold, something Daniel could never have imagined. I bought controlling shares in Hamilton & Co. I became, secretly, the majority owner of the very company where my husband worked. I hadn't planned on revealing it just yet. I wanted it to be a surprise one day, maybe a gift to both of us, a way to show Daniel that we were equals, partners in every sense of the word. But that night, when he dismissed our love as something small, when he forgot me so easily, I realized this secret wasn't just power. It was my strength. I wasn't just the wife he overlooked. I was the woman who owned the company he gave his life to. And one day soon, he was going to find out. That night, as Daniel slept soundly in our bed, I sat by the window, staring at the city lights. A storm was brewing inside me, not of revenge, but of resolve. If he had forgotten our love, I would remind him. Not with anger, not with begging, but with a truth so powerful, he would never see me the same way again. Because sometimes, the only way to heal a broken heart is to rise higher than the one who broke it. And my rise had just begun. The days after our forgotten anniversary felt strangely quiet. I carried myself like nothing had happened. But inside, I was hollow. Daniel went on with his life as if he hadn't just crushed me with his indifference. He woke up, dressed for work, checked his phone at breakfast, and left without so much as a glance in my direction. I wanted to scream at him, to ask him how he could look at me and not feel the weight of what he'd done. But instead, I smiled politely, served him his coffee, and let him believe I was still the same wife who waited at home, quietly forgiving. What he didn't realize was that each day, I was building something stronger, something he could never take from me. One evening, about a week later, I found myself at a shareholders' meeting at Hamilton & Co. No one there knew I was Daniel's wife. They only knew me as Sophia Hayes, the mysterious investor who had been buying up shares quietly, strategically, until suddenly, I was the majority owner. Sitting in that grand boardroom, surrounded by polished wood, leather chairs, and men in expensive suits, I felt a power I had never known before. For years, I had been introduced as Daniel's wife. But here, in this room, I wasn't anyone's wife. I was the woman who signed the checks. The CEO, Mr. Langford, stood at the head of the table speaking about profits and projections. And then, he turned to me with a smile. Our newest controlling shareholder, Mrs. Hayes, will now be joining us in a more active role. We're excited for her vision. Polite applause filled the room. I nodded gracefully, but my heart was racing. I wasn't just in this for power. I was in this because I needed to reclaim myself. That night, when I returned home, Daniel was sprawled on the couch, watching sports with a beer in his hand. He barely looked up when I walked in. "You're late," he muttered. "Where were you?" I hesitated, then said softly, "Out." He narrowed his eyes. "Out where? You never go out?" I smiled faintly. Maybe I should start. It startled him. For the first time in years, he actually looked at me, really looked, like he was trying to read my thoughts. But then he shrugged it off and turned back to the TV. He didn't know it yet, but the woman sitting across from him wasn't the same one he had taken for granted. A few days later, I decided to test him. Over dinner, I asked, "Daniel, how's work? Any big changes happening at Hamilton?" He sighed heavily, stabbing his fork into his food. "It's been stressful. The board's been restless. They keep talking about a new shareholder who's been making waves. Some Mrs. Hayes. Nobody knows who she is. Honestly, I think she's just another rich woman who doesn't understand business." He laughed as if it were a joke, as if women like me couldn't possibly belong in his world. I forced myself to smile, but inside I burned. He had no idea he was dismissing me to my face. "That must be tough," I said gently. "Do you think she'll change things?" He shrugged. "Women like that, they play with money the way kids play with toys. She'll get bored eventually. People like me are the backbone of that company, not people like her." I nodded slowly, hiding the storm rising in my chest. People like her. He didn't even know he was talking about his own wife. Weeks passed, and the distance between us grew. The more I found myself in boardrooms, making decisions that shaped Daniel's entire career, the less I felt tied to the life I had at home. But I wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. Some part of me still longed for the man I had married, the one who once whispered, "Forever." So one night, I tried again. I dressed in his favorite color, cooked his favorite meal, and waited. When he came home, he barely noticed. He dropped his briefcase, kissed me distractedly on the cheek, and mumbled, "I'm exhausted." I asked softly, Daniel, do you even see me anymore? He looked confused. Of course I do, Sophia. Why would you ask that? Tears stung my eyes, but I held them back. Because sometimes I feel invisible. He gave me a half-hearted smile, squeezed my hand, and said, You're overthinking. Then he pulled away and headed upstairs. And I realized in that moment, I wasn't invisible. He was blind. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. Daniel had a big presentation at work, the kind that could decide his future at the company. I knew, of course, because I had approved the budget myself. That morning, he was nervous. He paced the living room, muttering to himself, practicing his lines. He looked at me suddenly and said, Sophia, wish me luck. This could change everything for us. For us. The irony nearly made me laugh. I smiled sweetly and said, Good luck, darling. But inside, I thought, if only you knew whose hands your future really rests in. Because the person he was about to present to, the one whose approval he so desperately sought, was me. And he had no idea. The morning of the presentation felt electric. I stood in front of my mirror, adjusting my blazer, watching the woman staring back at me. She was no longer just Sophia, the forgotten wife. She was Mrs. Hayes, the controlling shareholder of Hamilton & Co. When I walked into the boardroom that day, the atmosphere shifted. Executives straightened their ties, assistants rushed to pour coffee, and even the usually stern Mr. Langford smiled warmly at me. Mrs. Hayes, he greeted. We're honored you could attend. I nodded politely, my expression calm, though inside my heart was racing, because in just a few minutes, Daniel would walk through that door. And then he did. Daniel entered the room carrying a stack of papers, his face set in determination. He didn't see me at first. He was too busy scanning his notes, rehearsing under his breath. But when his eyes finally landed on me, he froze. For a split second, his expression faltered. He blinked, confused, as though he was seeing a ghost. I held his gaze, my face unreadable. Good morning, Mr. Carter, I said smoothly, using his professional name. He swallowed hard, cleared his throat, and nodded. Good morning. The room fell silent, all eyes shifting between us. No one knew the truth of our connection, and I wasn't ready to reveal it. Not yet. Please, I gestured to the podium. You may begin. Daniel launched into his presentation. His voice was strong at first, confident, but I noticed the slight tremor in his hands. He clicked through slides about market growth, projections, and strategies, doing everything he could to impress the board. But every few seconds his eyes flickered to me. He was unsettled. I sat perfectly still, expression composed, pen in hand as I took notes. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I let him squirm under the weight of my presence. At one point, his voice cracked. He coughed, tried to recover, then stammered over a figure. Mr. Langford raised an eyebrow. Another executive whispered something under his breath. Daniel's face reddened. He was unraveling. And I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction that he was finally seeing me in a position of power he never imagined. Sadness because I never wanted it to come to this. When he finally finished, the room was quiet. He stood at the podium, sweating, eyes darting nervously toward me as if begging for approval. I let the silence hang for a moment. Then I spoke. Thank you, Mr. Carter. That was enlightening. His jaw tightened. He knew my words were carefully chosen and not entirely flattering. The other board members asked questions, poking holes in his numbers, pressing him on strategies. He tried to hold his ground, but his earlier confidence was gone. Finally, Mr. Langford turned to me. Mrs. Hayes, as the majority shareholder, would you care to share your thoughts? All eyes shifted to me, including Daniel's. I took a breath and rose from my chair. My heels clicked against the polished floor as I walked slowly to the head of the table. I could feel Daniel's gaze burning into me, 1,000 unspoken questions swirling in his mind. I placed my hands lightly on the table and said, "Mr. Carter's presentation had its strengths, but I believe we need vision that goes beyond numbers. Hamilton & Co. must be more than just profits. It must be a company of integrity, of balance, of people who honor their commitments." My words hung heavy in the air. Daniel's face paled. He knew those words weren't just for the boardroom. They were for him. After the meeting ended, executives filed out one by one, shaking my hand, offering polite compliments. Daniel lingered by the door, waiting. When the room finally cleared, it was just the two of us. He turned to me, his voice low, almost pleading. "Sophia, what is going on?" I stood there, composed, though my heart was pounding. "What's going on?" I repeated softly. "Is that you've been working for me, Daniel, for months now." His eyes widened, disbelief etched across his face. You're Mrs. Hayes?" I gave a faint, sad smile. "Yes. The woman you dismissed as just another rich investor. The woman you laughed about at our dinner table. That woman is your wife." He staggered back a step, running a hand through his hair. "Why didn't you tell me?" I met his gaze, my voice steady. "Because I wanted to see if you would ever truly see me. Not as your wife waiting at home. Not as someone invisible, but as your equal. And now you know." His mouth opened, then closed again. He looked lost, stripped of the arrogance he always carried. "Sophia," he whispered, voice breaking. But I held up my hand, stopping him. "Don't. Not here. Not now. Think about what I've said. Think about who I've become. And then ask yourself if you're ready to see me for who I really am." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, silent, stunned, and for once in his life, powerless. When I got home that evening, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Daniel wasn't on the couch watching sports. He wasn't in the kitchen rummaging through the fridge. Instead, I found him in our bedroom, sitting at the edge of the bed with his head in his hands. When he heard me, he looked up. His eyes were red, not from alcohol this time, but from something I hadn't seen in a long time. Shame. "Sophia," he whispered. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you keep this from me?" I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "Because I wanted to see if you'd notice me without being forced to. I wanted to know if I meant more to you than convenience, more than someone who makes dinner and smiles while you forget the life we built together." He winced at my words. "That's not fair." I laughed bitterly. "Fair? Was it fair that you forgot our anniversary? That you brushed me aside like a burden when all I ever did was stand by you? Tell me, Daniel, when was the last time you looked at me and really saw me?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. For days after that, the air in our house was heavy. We spoke only when necessary, casual words that felt like strangers making small talk. But underneath, there was a storm brewing. I saw the way Daniel looked at me differently now, hesitant, almost fearful. He treated me with a politeness that felt foreign, as though he was speaking to his boss, rather than his wife. One night, he tried to bridge the distance. He came home early, holding a bouquet of flowers, the kind he used to bring me when we first married. "Sophia," he said softly, placing them on the counter. "I'm sorry. For everything. I was arrogant. I thought my work was everything, but I didn't realize that I was losing you in the process." I stared at the flowers. Once they would have melted my heart. Now they felt like too little, too late. "Do you really mean that?" I asked quietly. "Or are you just scared because I own the company that holds your career in my hands?" His face twisted with hurt. "You think that's all I care about?" I didn't answer. Deep down, I wanted to believe him, but the scars of neglect ran deep. A week later, I attended another board meeting. Daniel presented again, and this time, he was sharper, more prepared. I could tell he was trying, desperately, to prove himself not just to the company, but to me. And yet, every time our eyes met across that polished table, a question lingered between us. Was our marriage about love, or about power now? The breaking point came one Friday night. I had just returned home from a late dinner with investors when I found Daniel waiting in the living room. No beer in his hand, no TV blaring, just him, sitting in silence. "We need to talk," he said firmly. I set my bag down and sat across from him. "About what?" "About us," he said. His voice was steady, but his eyes shimmered with something raw. "I know I've failed you. I know I forgot the most important day of our lives, and I know I made you feel invisible. But Sophia, I can't lose you. Not to this company. Not to your anger. Not to anyone." Tears burned my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. "Do you even remember the man you used to be, Daniel? The one who held my hand at our wedding and promised forever? Because somewhere along the way you lost him, and when you lost him, you lost me too." He leaned forward, his voice breaking. "Then help me find him again, please." For the first time in years, I saw Daniel vulnerable. Not the ambitious man chasing promotions, not the dismissive husband too busy to care. Just Daniel. My Daniel. And yet, forgiveness isn't simple. It isn't a switch you flip. It's a choice. That night, I didn't give him an answer. I simply stood and whispered, "We'll see." Then I walked upstairs, leaving him staring after me, broken and uncertain. But the truth was, I was uncertain too. Part of me wanted to hold on to my strength, to make him feel every ounce of the pain he had caused me. But another part, the part that still remembered the trembling hands at our wedding, the man who once whispered forever, longed to believe he could change. And so, for the first time in years, the future of our marriage wasn't in his hands. It was in mine. The following weeks were a strange dance between us. Daniel, once careless and distracted, now tried desperately to win back what he had taken for granted. He started coming home earlier, setting the table, cooking dinner, burnt pasta, over-salted soup, but with a sincerity that almost broke me. He would ask about my day, about my work, as though he wanted to step into my world, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to let him in anymore. Because every time he smiled at me, I heard the echo of his words. I don't have time to remember every little thing. And every time he touched my hand, I remembered the cold anniversary night I sat alone with melted candles and untouched reservations. Love doesn't die overnight. But trust, once broken, it leaves cracks that even time struggles to heal. One Friday evening, we attended a company gala. The ballroom sparkled with chandeliers, laughter, and clinking glasses. Daniel walked beside me, his hand lightly resting on my back as though to show the world we were still united. But when colleagues approached us, I noticed something new. They didn't look at Daniel first anymore. They looked at me. They shook my hand, addressed me as Mrs. Hayes, asked me about the company's future. Daniel stood there, smiling stiffly, the proud husband mask plastered on his face. But I could see it, the bruised ego, the discomfort of being overshadowed. Later that night, as we drove home in silence, he finally spoke. "Do you enjoy it?" he asked quietly. "Enjoy what?" I replied. "Being the one in charge. Having everyone look at you the way they used to look at me." I turned to him slowly. "I don't enjoy power for power's sake, Daniel. I enjoy finally being seen." He flinched as though I'd struck him. The tension between us grew heavier. He was trying, I couldn't deny that. But part of me wondered if he was trying to win me back, or just trying to restore the version of himself that once stood taller than me. One evening, as I sat by the window with a glass of wine, Daniel joined me. He didn't speak right away. He just sat there, staring at the city lights. Finally, he whispered, "I feel like I'm losing you. No matter what I do, you're slipping away from me." I set my glass down. Maybe because for years you let me slip away without even noticing. His voice broke. "I was blind, Sophia. Blind and selfish. And I know it's my fault. But please, tell me there's still a part of you that loves me." The silence between us was deafening, because I did love him. Against all logic, against all the pain, a part of me still loved him. But love without trust, it's like a house without a foundation. Beautiful on the outside, crumbling within. A week later, everything came to a head. I walked into the office one morning to find whispers rippling through the halls. Daniel had clashed with another executive, loudly, publicly, embarrassingly. His temper, once hidden, had exploded under the pressure of being constantly compared to me. When I entered the boardroom, I found him standing there, flushed and furious. The other executives avoided eye contact, clearly uncomfortable. As the meeting began, I addressed the issue. Calmly. Professionally. But Daniel cut in sharply, his voice laced with frustration. "Easy for you to say," he snapped. "You don't know what it's like to work your way up, to earn every inch, every drop of respect. You just walked in and bought it all." The room went silent. My heart clenched. Because behind his anger, I heard the raw truth. His pride, his fear of being diminished, his desperate need to matter. But his words cut deep. I rose slowly, my voice steady though my hands trembled. "You think I didn't earn this? You think building something from my father's inheritance was easy? Do you know how many sleepless nights, how many risks, how many sacrifices it took? Don't you dare reduce me to money, Daniel. I built myself. While you were forgetting me, I was finding myself." He stared at me, eyes wide, chest heaving. And for the first time, the boardroom wasn't just a workplace. It was our battlefield. That night, at home, Daniel broke down. He dropped to his knees in front of me, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry, Sophia. I'm so sorry. I don't care about the company, the promotions, the pride. I just care about you. Please, don't give up on us." I stood there, heart aching. Because forgiveness is easy to say, but living it, that's the hardest part of all. Daniel was still on his knees, his hands clutching mine, his tears soaking the rug beneath him. In that moment, I felt torn between two lives, the woman who once dreamed of a forever with him, and the woman who had risen from the ashes of neglect, stronger than she ever thought possible. "Please," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Don't walk away from me. Don't walk away from us." I closed my eyes, letting his words sink into the deepest part of me. For years, I had begged for this, for him to see me, to fight for me, to choose me. And now, when I finally had it, I wasn't sure I wanted it anymore. I gently pulled my hands from his grasp and sat down on the couch. He looked up at me, desperate, like a drowning man reaching for air. "Daniel," I said softly, "do you even know what you're asking for?" He frowned. "I'm asking for another chance." I shook my head. "No. You were asking me to forget the nights I cried myself to sleep while you stayed late at work. You were asking me to erase the memory of our anniversary, the night I sat alone with candles burning down to nothing while you did not even notice. You were asking me to pretend that all the years of being invisible didn't to break me." His face crumpled, and for a moment I almost softened. But then I remembered the way he laughed at Mrs. Hayes over dinner, mocking the very woman I had become. "You don't get to erase my pain," I whispered. "Not with flowers, not with tears. He sank back onto the floor, defeated. Then what can I do? Tell me. Tell me how to fix this. The silence between us stretched. I didn't answer right away because the truth was, I didn't know. Could love survive betrayal? Could trust be rebuilt when the foundation had crumbled? That night, I didn't give him an answer. I simply stood, walked upstairs, and left him in the quiet of the living room, alone with his regret. The days that followed were heavy. At work, Daniel was subdued, humbled, no longer the loud, ambitious man who once filled boardrooms with his voice. At home, he was gentle, careful with his words, as if one wrong move might shatter me completely. One evening, I found him sitting at the dining table with an old photo album spread open. It was from our first year of marriage, smiles so wide, eyes so full of hope. He looked up when I entered, his voice trembling. "Do you remember this day?" he asked, pointing to a photo of us at the beach, laughing as the waves crashed at our feet. I did. It was the first trip we took after our wedding, before work consumed him, before I became invisible. I was happy then, I admitted softly. His eyes welled with tears. So was I. I want to find our way back to that. Tell me it's not too late. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, my mind in turmoil. I could walk away. I had the money, the power, the independence. I didn't need him anymore. But love isn't about need. It's about want. And despite everything, despite the scars and the hurt, a part of me still wanted him. But I also wanted him to earn me back, to prove that love wasn't just words, but actions. The climax came on our next anniversary, 1 year after the night that broke me. That morning, I woke up expecting nothing. I had conditioned myself not to hope, not to set myself up for disappointment. But when I came downstairs, the house was different. Candles lined the hallway. The dining room table was set with roses, dinner already prepared. And there, in the center of the table, was the little velvet box, the very one I had given him last year, the watch still inside, untouched. Daniel stood there, his hands shaking, his eyes glassy with emotion. "I didn't deserve this last year," he said softly. "I didn't deserve you. But I kept it, because I couldn't bear to throw away something so precious, just like I can't throw away us. Sophia, please, let me make this right." Tears streamed down my face. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to push him away. But in that moment, I saw the man I had fallen in love with, the one who trembled when he put a ring on my finger, the one who whispered forever. And for the first time in years, I let myself believe he meant it again. I didn't answer right away. I walked over, picked up the watch and fastened it around his wrist. "Forever isn't easy," I whispered. "It's messy, it hurts, but if you're truly ready to fight for it, then so am I." His lips trembled as he pulled me into his arms. "I'll spend the rest of my life proving it." And for the first time in a long time, I let myself hope. As Daniel held me close, I realized something profound. Love isn't about perfection. It isn't about grand gestures, or even about remembering every date. It's about being present, about choosing each other again and again, even when it's hard. He had failed me. Yes. He had forgotten me, neglected me. But in that moment, as his arms trembled around me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Truth. Daniel wasn't promising to be flawless. He was promising to fight, to show up, to see me. And that, I realized, was all I had ever truly wanted. The months that followed weren't magical. We still argued. We still struggled. Trust, once broken, takes time to heal. But he kept his word. He came home early. He listened when I spoke. He no longer brushed off my dreams as silly. And slowly, brick by brick, we rebuilt. The woman who had bought his company was no longer the same fragile wife he ignored. I was stronger now, unafraid to walk away if I was ever invisible again. And he knew that. He respected that. In a strange way, the pain had saved us. Because sometimes, love needs to be tested in fire to discover if it's real. Years later, when people asked me what kept us together, I would smile and say, "Love isn't about never falling apart. It's about finding the courage to rebuild, together." And as I watched Daniel playing with our children in the garden, laughter ringing through the air, I realized something else. He had forgotten one anniversary, but he never forgot me again.